Yesterday, 3 people were shot and killed in Montreal. In this video, I'm going to talk about what happened there, as well as more of a comment on how and what the online conversation looks like and how to kind of have conversations like that, at least what I'm doing, as well as the regular things. If you're here for the first time, my name is Duncan Alderdice, and in these videos, I make short ones in the morning on my walk as I talk through thoughts I'm having, as I'm trying to put my life back together again. Today, it's going to be this kind of thing. So context, this also is coming 2 weeks out 2 weeks after this occurred. But so yesterday at 11:30, there was an Albertan resident who traveled from Alberta with a long barrel rifle to Montreal, and within a Jewish neighborhood of Côte des Neiges, posted up in a hotel outside of another building, and then shot at that building. Later on, when police arrived on the scene, that turned into an actual gunfight in which the result of the gunman shot and killed one of the Montreal police officers, as well as there was another innocent bystander, a beloved member of the Jewish community. I don't forget his name, but I can put description there, who was inadvertently shot by one of the police officers, who herself then was later with the exchange, was shot repeatedly by the gunman. That officer was in critical condition, but has stabilized since the incident occurred. And as well, in the end, about 2.5 hours later, the initial gunman was shot down by the Montreal police and is deceased right there. So that's crazy. Car's coming, so I'll just pause there in a second. So, 3 dead as a consequence of that, by one officer, an innocent civilian, and the gunman. Now, one thing is just like right now, unsurprisingly, people are exploding online talking about this. If you've seen the videos, they're actually quite disturbing. Because it's like, I don't know who's watching this, but there's one thing watching like Ukraine footage online of YouTube of drone attacks, and then that also is disturbing, but there's a degree of separation of going like, well, that's in a country somewhere else. And at least for me, planning to move back to Montreal, get away, fly, and having lived there, actually been where the shooting actually was. Like, I've walked on those. Let's say if it was on a sidewalk, I've walked on that specific sidewalk. It's just a different level of thing, but things like this don't really happen in Montreal. In 2023 and 2024 combined, there were 7 separate incidents where a police officer discharged their firearm, so they actually shot. Like 7 over the course of 2 years. So something like this at this major scale hasn't happened since the 90s, like early 90s. Like, this is not a typical situation. What I can say is I'm happy about is that they have not published the name of the gunman. They have of the officer who died and the civilian who died. But I'm glad that they didn't, whoever the authorities have decided to not give that gunman a degree of notoriety and whatever. And I hope they continue to do so. Because comments online are, what I can say confidently is everyone is, what we all want in a situation like this is a degree of psychological comfort and an explanation that serves as an explanation as to what happened. And so in order for us to believe, at least on some level, that this could have been prevented or will be prevented in the future, putting some form of order onto the chaos that we just witnessed. Now, there are things online going from, this is what happens because Canada's gun control is so incredible. This is what happens, and the gunman had a manifesto and is part of the incel community, and it was an attack on women, that they were shooting at some sort of porn headquarter location, to the Alberta is trying to attack Quebec. which I think is I'm laughing because I go, that's the silliest one. Like that's whatever. Two, going, this is why we shouldn't have females as officers. And it's a consequence of the equity or equalization, like DEI policies, or the cop was not trained well enough to fit that situation and should be reprimanded, on the negative at least. There are, of course, a lot of them people going like, this is a terrible situation, which it fucking is. But I think the thing that, if you have seen the videos, and you might not have yet, but for a brief kind of description, there's a point where you see kind of like a divider, like big blocks, maybe like a meter wide, like 3 feet wide by, I don't know, 5 meters, or what is that, 15 feet long. And you see it pan out where there's two police officers. One hits the ground and then kind of crawls over to a car. You were hearing gunshots this whole time. That police officer then dies. And then you see the second police officer, she's like crouched behind the barrier, hearing the shots, and the bystander kind of just walks, or the civilian turns the corner, like to come get cover, but the officer's looking down, or I don't know where her head is like looking, but when he turns the corner, she like pops up quick and shoots him, like in less than a second. That is the shot that, at least all the footage I have seen, led to their death. And so people are blaming the officer by going, well, you should have been, like, that's negligence. You should have been more under control and identified your target in less than 2 feet and decided, oh no, that's a civilian. Which I feel is a very unfair framing of the situation for the officer. I look at it and I go, fuck yeah, that looks like an instinctual reaction. Like, just like bang. And the thing I brought up, the few cases that exist in Montreal, is that the police officers, I'm not expecting there to be a gunman. Like, this is not something that occurs, that they're getting ready for, that they have a tremendous amount of experience in. And so to say that it's the female officers rather than the male officers' fault in this situation, like that, it just, like, I don't see how the takeaway isn't, well, she inadvertently shot him, and the focus should be back on to the guy who actually caused the situation in the first place. Lots to say about that. It's a tragedy either way. I also don't see how it's necessarily a going like, well, we need gun control or whatever, or the opposite of gun control, like more guns. But what I am starting to see is just the types of people that exist out there, and specifically ones who have these strong opinions that seem what you could call as misogynistic, or you could call as just like like you're not seeing the situation correctly. Consistently don't have like they're hiding behind a pseudonym online. Like, there's no picture of their face behind their comments. That's of a different person. And it like they're hiding behind that. And I don't think like they're hiding behind that just to cause chaos, but it isn't ever a person that at least I'm going like, well, you sound like an idiot, or your perspective doesn't make sense from my perspective, but at least I can see you as a human being and just disagree with that and then reason with you. But when you're not, then it's like, ooh, what are you trying to do here? At least, I don't know. There's I would call it cowardice or whatever. But so that's the situation that's kind of occurring. The thing that I have been thinking about, and what I'll talk about for now, is how you actually engage in these kinds of conversations. Because what I've noticed is sometimes it can go, one person goes like, that cop, like that female cop was the idiot and should get the death penalty or reprimanded. And if you ask, someone will reply, and then they will reply back, and it just turns into an insult fest. And to me, I go, okay, well, so the way to approach these conversations is you need to, and what I have been doing, trying to do at least, probably failing to the best degree, but is focus on asking questions. And it kind of is like objection handling, is like you need to acknowledge what the other person has said and like make them feel heard at least. Otherwise, they're not going to be receptive into what you're saying. And then if you're going to steer the conversation, like saying you're wrong, you're an idiot, or you're a smooth-brained imbecile for having such a retarded perspective as that, like that's not going to, the person on the other side isn't going to read that and go like, ooh, this person seems like a reasonable person that I should listen to. It's like, no, this person called me a smooth-brained imbecile. I'm going to call them a piece of fucking shit. And then we're just making face noise at each other because we're upset about a situation. Where if you're, I guess, and this is more the theory of it, but like if you're trying to change someone's mind, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to change someone's mind? Like, how do we measure, has a mind been changed? Like, you can say, like, they now believe something else. But I believe that kind of is too far of a step and unrealistic, because someone can say, oh yeah, I believe you, just to kind of get out of a conversation. That it's like, okay, well, maybe you can open their eyes to, or expose them to an alternative perspective, legitimate. And then it's like, okay, cool. But then, like, I guess the kind of goal is, at least what I think, is that, like, you're trying to decrease the likelihood that they engage in a similar behavior such as that in the future. Where that behavior for me is just immediately jumping to a conclusion that, and going, the female cop should be that, or whatever. And go like, okay, well, what I want to act as is not the source of truth, because it's not just, it's arrogant for me to say, oh no, my perspective is right and they should be thinking my way. But at least I can serve as that, because everybody has the capacity to critically think. The question is whether or not they choose to practice that in that moment. And it actually takes effort and cognitive effort to think. It's a lot easier to go like, well, that officer was negligent and useless and I could have done better in that situation. She should have had a better vantage point on the situation, and like whatever. That's a lot easier way to kind of explain and go like, okay, well, this terrible thing, but I don't know really what happened or how to control it, that's caused me psychological anxiety internally and angst. Oh no, well, the officer's a piece of shit and she sucks. Yeah, okay, cool. There, I have my explanation now. But it takes effort to then go like, okay, but hold on, what is the deeper problem from that? So from there is, if I'm asking questions, not challenging directly, but in a way that just like, the goal is not to make them think something different, but consider something they hadn't doing. If I confront them as an unreasonable heretic, being like, you're a piece of shit, how could you possibly think something like that? Like, that's a kind of an accusation. That's not going to get them to participate in the conversation or a logical and rational dialogue. But to say something like, well, do you think that it's an unfair framing? Or I can't think of the questions I asked, but I think the thing that I'm trying to route to as well is there's that, like, what is that poem or come on, proverb, like, hurt people. So like you go like, well, the person who's saying, oh, that officer should be that and all these insults, it's like only people who are in a particular state of mind such that seems like a reasonable option are the ones selecting that as an option. Okay, so like have the compassion to see the human before you see the words you disagree with. And the strength that comes with, I think that's what it is, positioning the questions away from, and either you agree with me and I disagree with you and I win and you lose, and kind of give them an out with, if you're saying like you're wrong with your question, give them an out of like, oh, that's what it was, is sometimes people would have like that officer should be killed herself. And like the question I would ask is, do you actually believe this? Or was this just your first emotional reaction or first reaction? Because it's like, it's unreasonable for someone to say like, I don't know, to go at that situation, it's unreasonable to have the perspective that the officer who shot the civilian, just on that fact alone, should be reprimanded. Like, that seems fair. But to then say that like those words represent entirely who you are, and for the rest, I don't think you're going to get a good conversation. You're just going to get that person in a defensive state of mind, just trying to justify that. Whereas you can go, like, if you give them an out, going like, hey, like are you sure about that? Because sometimes, I mean, I'm not me when I'm hungry. And so, like, that's a different person. If when I'm hungry, I'm not thinking as clearly as I could be, and therefore I'm not as articulate, rational, or logical in the things that I'm saying. Okay, so I can see how someone who just watched a video of an officer getting shot, bleeding out, and then another officer shooting a civilian, both of which end up dying, not putting you into a solid, rational state of mind. So I think when asking questions to the best degree that you can, like having discussions online, I will, like I'm not saying what you should do, but what I'm focused on is to focus on asking questions that steer the conversation, helping the other person be exposed to a different perspective and more critically and effectively think about the situation in a manner that doesn't position them as a loser or an idiot for the words they previously said. And again, you can't solve everyone. Some people are idiots, and you never argue with idiots because they'll drag you down to their level and beat you with experience, which is a funny sort of quid pro quo. It's not a quid pro quo. But yeah, those are the thoughts I'm having on that. Truck is coming, so I'll finish the video in 1 second. The last thing I'll say is, as I was writing the comments in replies to the ones that I didn't really agree with or went going, I don't feel like it was actually difficult to come up with those questions in a way that wasn't, like, it was a lot. I wanted to just go like, you're a fucking idiot. Like, how could you possibly think something like that? Like, you have no compassion, you spineless dumb fuck. Like, that's a lot easier. Or going like, you really think that you could do better in that situation? Like, you're fucking fat and like, you don't look like you've seen a lick of close quarters combat in your fucking life. What from what position are you saying that person shouldn't have done better? Like, that's a lot easier. Like, I'm just coming up with them right now. It's difficult to go like, okay, well, what am I actually trying to ask of this person? And I think that is important, because especially in situations like this, like I said to begin with, what we all can agree on is, and what our focus should be on, is that it's a terrible situation that happened. All of it is making us uncomfortable. We want a reason for this so that we can feel a sense of control and preventing it from occurring in the future, and that the negative attention should remain on the perpetrator and looking into the underlying causes as to why that perpetrator did it in the first place. Apparently there was a manifesto written, something connected with incel movement or whatever. There's just lots of words being thrown out right now. But I don't doubt that man was alone and disconnected from society and was taking out his revenge in the way that he knew how, which is sad in and of itself. But one more car and then I'll do the goodbye. So that, all of that is to say, terrible that happened. But what I will say is, like, just whoever's watching this, wherever you are, I appreciate you watching to the end. And I know you know this already. You might not, but I'll say it again anyways, is that desire is what drives you forward. The pain you're going through is necessary. That is why you need to believe in yourself, because you're more capable of doing great things than you give yourself credit. Lean in, aim up, and move forward. Yes, you can. Yes, you will.